We're doing this. Hello, everybody. Why am I trying to sound like Markiplier? B.M.W. here, and you know what? Why bother making an intro? I know what we're all here for. Why I think Kieran still did nothing wrong. Only this go around. I'm treating this like a whole court case. Join me as I take a deep dive into the second DLC to dissect and discuss key moments about our little troublemaker and prove why Kieran, despite his track record, is actually innocent. Sound good? I hope you're ready to be here for the long run, but let's get started. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, now that court is in session, allow me to begin with a short recap for my first exhibit, Prelude. So after all the shenanigans in Kitakami came to a conclusion, Kieran at this point in time would be in a concerning state of mind, fueled by betrayal, loss, and obsession. His only known friend had abandoned him for Carmine, kept him in the dark about Ogerpon, and had the audacity of taking said Pokemon, the one thing Kieran had always wanted to meet and befriend. Now through some twisted but poetic revelation, only one thing echoes throughout his mind: become stronger. And with a smile on his face, prepares for a run back with the player. Alright folks, now that we're refreshed on some events from the Teal Mask, now it's time for Exhibit B, Kieran's takeover of Blueberry Academy. So a few months after the Kitakami incident, trademarked by me, the player gets an invitation to attend the esteemed Blueberry Academy, and eventually reunites with Carmine. The reunion, however, is suddenly interrupted by some nearby commotion, only to find that the noise is from a troubled youngster and, dear God, he went from looking like the nice kid to an actual delinquent. And I must say, in my opinion, 10 out of 10 redesign. Back on topic. Kieran's just having a civil conversation with his peer. Oh, and unless you've already played the game, this is basically how the conversation went. Why didn't you train 5 Pokemon like I asked?
About that, a lot has been going on back home. My dad got sick, so he can't work. My sister wanted to get married to Lola, and my uncle lost all his money at the casino, so I haven't been able to train much lately.
Okay, I get it.
You do?
Yes, I do. I understand that you prefer to be trubbish.
Huh?
Garbodor. Trash.
What? No, that's not what I meant.
Oh, I know exactly what you meant. You just prefer to be weak, irrelevant, and especially right now, a pushover. So I'm going to do you a little favor by removing you from the club.
Kieran, please. I'll make time to work harder. I'll become strong.
Shut your mouth, you mediocre
Pokemon trainer.
mediocre.
Despite my trash acting, remember this scene. But to think that this was the same shy, innocent kid that we met back in Kitakami, how did we come to this? Oh yeah, I almost forgot. We'll get to them later. So after that lovely display between peers, we come to find out that Kieran has been on a major grind set since we left Kitakami, even skipping on sleep just to maintain it, until he was strong enough to take on the title of champion for himself. So basically Kieran is top dog in this entire facility, which is not good for anyone, especially for that ego. And from what we saw earlier and even throughout the DLC, his motto might as well be, with great power comes great status. Because he's either admired or possibly feared by his peers. But we ain't done yet. Trust me, there's more. And I've been waiting to talk about what's coming up next. Sometime later, the player would try to sign up for the Blueberry League, but can't get approved because we're an exchange student. Drayden is trying his hardest to get a sign in, but the receptionist is not trying to budge in the slightest. However, seemingly out of nowhere, Kieran shows up. And the moment he says that he's allowing us to join the league, she immediately obliges. Hold it! Nah, Peep how there was no hesitation whatsoever. She changed moods just like that. I'm pretty sure Sonic couldn't run faster than her reaction time. Now, what I'm about to say after this may sound crazy, if not stupid, but stick with me on this one. There's no way that this interaction would ever happen in real life. So you're telling me that because Kieran, a kid mind you, is legally a champion of this facility, he can do whatever he wants? No. If this was the case, you can't convince me how this would ever make sense. If this scene was more realistic, that receptionist would have asked someone, if not Serrano himself, if it was okay for us to enter the league. Instead, she complies like Kieran is her boss. Like, imagine a kindergartner or a 5th grader walking up to one of the teachers, standing 10 toes down and eyeing this person, and demanding that recess gets extended for another hour, if not the rest of the school day. And the teacher just says, okay. No! You cannot convince me that any adult would ever let some half-pint tell them what to do. Don't even try to prove me wrong. You know as well as I do that if this were to happen to you, you'd consider sending that kid flying like Team Rockets. Now, y'all know how unrealistic my scenario was, but I know what you're thinking. This is a kid's game. Children take center stage in all the mainline games and yada yada yada. And I say to you, Lacey literally mentions that there are rules here, yet Kieran is still getting away with bending a, presumably, established rule for his own benefit. But that's also a fair point. Boring, generic, but fair. So I'll give you that one if you thought of it. Don't even lie to yourself. But back on topic, it doesn't ease my mind about the potential implications from this interaction alone. Like, there's no wonder why this kid is walking around like he owns the place, because the adults seemingly don't care.
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care. Let me tell you, we don't care.
If you really think about it, his behavior is not unwarranted completely. It's going unpunished and unchallenged. Kieran might as well be running this entire facility because no one is willing to address the issues he has caused. This boy is out here talking down kids bigger than himself and has people who are close to him on edge, including his own sister. I mean, it's deserved, but we'll get to her. To make a comparison, this is about as bad as setting a kid loose in a Walmart or giving some rando free reign in a bar and the staff don't bat an eye. All the while the customers have to deal with the nonsense. And you think someone like Serrano, the head honcho, would step in. But no. He's just chilling in his corner like, well, that ain't my problem. And all I can say is, what are you here for? Don't none of y'all ask me to try to fix him. Y'all are literally allowing him to be a little monster. Hey, if you like this video, you thought I was about to put in a shameless plug in the middle of the video, huh? Nah, but check this out. I forgot to mention something. There's a scene where Drayden states that the academy allows students autonomy. And after a quick Google search, because I didn't know exactly what that word meant. Stop the cap. Who said that? And well, now you know why that's a bad idea. You really thought this one through, didn't you, Serrano? My point still stands, and this man, despite being a fellow chocolate brother, is a certified idiot. Let's resume with the trial. Okay, the last exhibit was a bit of a chunky one, so if you need to, pause the video, grab you some snacks, drinks, or go take care of your business. I'll be waiting here. You back? Cool. Let's resume. Now, originally, I was going to talk about the Kieran fight and then discuss Kieran's story arc in this DLC, but I want to save the character analysis for last before we wrap things up. Plus, we all know how the fight went down. And how it ended. But I will say this. I shouldn't have gone in blind. I still won the first try, but he did knock out my starter. And let's just say, like Ash, I was ready to show him who else learned close combat. Excuse me, I'm supposed to be defending my client, not trying to harm him. Regardless, allow me to present to you our next exhibit, the teacher. Now, let me ask you, what comes to mind when you think of a teacher? An individual who's knowledgeable, trustworthy, and or somewhat a role model? Tell me, dear viewer, what do you think of this woman? Does she seem trustworthy, knowledgeable, role modelish? Nevertheless, this woman nearly got herself and 3 kids buried alive. Questions aside, this is Briar, a new character that was introduced in a teal mask and is a teacher at Blueberry Academy. But unlike the other teacher characters in the game, she has major lore. Long story short, Briar is a descendant of Heath, the man that traversed Area Zero and the author of the Scarvio book. And just like her ancestor, Briar wants to explore Area Zero. She gains permission, of course, but she can't go alone. And that's where we come in. A bunch of kids. I would go on a rant about how this is a terrible idea, but this is the Pokemon world, so my argument would be redundant. Not to mention the plot needs to happen. Instead, let's focus on how Briar is involved with Kieran. After we take our seats, Briar tells us why she wants to go to Area Zero, but later reveals that she has another motive for going. She then proceeds to inform us that she wants to find the legendary Pokemon Terapagos. And guess who decides to perk up after hearing that? Obvious red flag aside, he then follows up by saying that he wants to catch it, and I say, and I quote, "This time, I won't let this chance go." I remember not catching on to this during my playthrough, but now I realize this was a correlation to prior events and it was as clear as day. Remember the last time he met a legendary? Remember how that went down? Kieran in the scene basically said that he's not about to let history repeat itself. And what makes this scene more tragic is that Kieran at this point is still contemplating over his loss against us, which he did not take lightly. And if we add in the context of his encounters with Ogerpon and seeing her in action, his new motive was obvious. I will make Terapagos mine and then I can beat them. So after that explanation, we know that Kieran wasn't mentally prepared to go on anybody's expedition, but Briar seemingly confused his plotting for enthusiasm. Yeah, I'll just consider this strike one for her. Even though it wasn't intentional, her not noticing the multiple red flags that Kieran gave off, Briar inadvertently jeopardized the mission before it even began. If you're thinking right now that, oh, this doesn't sound too bad, you're just making this sound worse than it is. It does get worse, and I'm about to bring it to light. Sometime after traversing the underground and beating some sub-bosses, us and the gang finally arrive in the final room. Kieran and Briar stumble upon a peculiar stone at the end of the cave, and this is where things start to go south. While Briar is busy looking through her book, Kieran, while tugging a rock, proclaims that if he gets the hidden treasure, he can finally beat us in battle. Pause. Enhance image. Did you notice how she did not react to Kieran's declaration here? Even while he goes on a rant, Briar is still reading in her book like she can't hear anything. And I know good and well that book, which she probably has read and studied countless times, is not that fascinating for you not to be able to hear the conversation at large. And you're right there at ground zero. I would like to imagine that a normal person would detest this, arguing how the purpose of this expedition was for science and discovery, but sadly no. As Kieran is actively venting out his frustrations towards us and Carmine, you know what Briar has to say about it? Nah, either she's deaf or she just doesn't care. All that she's concerned about is that stone, and she's encouraging him to rip it out the wall like nothing happened, all the while having a look that makes her look conniving. I swear she looks like a villain. Once again, more red flags. But for both of them. You'd think that she'd realize that she's basically giving an unknown legendary to a pseudo-antagonist, knowing full well what he's going to use it for. Instead, because she's so fixated on finding Terapagos, she encourages him to yank the stone from the wall. How are you a teacher again? Besides that, the rock evolves, and you know what? He's actually kind of adorable. Oh, look at the little guy. Oh, you're waddling towards me. Oh, come here, precious. Wait, stop. What are you doing? I will never do that again. Actually, you know what? Future me, can you edit this bit out? Because I feel like that was a bit too cringy. You know, being a man and all. And talking all cutesy towards a fictional little creature. Yeah, I don't think that should make it to the final cut. Just do me, well, you, a favor and keep that out. Thanks. Anyways, Terapagos gets caught, Kieran accomplishes a part of his goal, and Briar... oh, Briar. She wants Kieran to start a battle for study. Huh. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Now, this wouldn't have been much of an issue if we ignored the red flags from earlier, except for a few glaring facts. Terapagos is an unknown Pokemon who's tied with terrestrial energy, so no one knew exactly what it was capable of at the time. We're who knows how many miles below the surface and however far we traveled from the elevator. And Briar thought it was such an excellent idea to initiate a battle where, realistically speaking, could have had the possibility of causing, oh, I don't know, a cave-in. It doesn't stop Kieran, for he's been ready for another match. This is strike 2 for Briar. Also, I'm just going to make a tally score for how many red flags both Briar and Kieran have made, otherwise I'm going to start repeating words. We fight Kieran again, and he loses again, once again feeling disappointed and defeated. This go around, Carmine decides to participate in the plot, trying to stop Kieran from being nonsensical, but Briar has other plans. She asks Kieran to try to unleash Terapagos' true power by using his Terra Orb, thinking that it will revitalize the Pokemon. And Kieran does so. What follows is exactly what you expect to happen. So to the surprise of no one, Terapagos goes wild with terrestrial energy, and now being too strong to go back into a Master Ball is putting our party in mortal danger. If you couldn't tell by now, Briar annoys me. As much as I don't like her, she had too many good scenes that tie in with my client's case that I had to give her her own exhibit. Like this scene, for instance. It doesn't get more evident than this.
This is crazy.
However, I wouldn't go as far as to say that she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs kind of crazy, but she is certainly obsessed. But what makes this scene funny, at least to me, is her follow-up cutscene once the battle has been initiated. She seemingly snaps back into reality, now realizing the danger she put everybody in, and has the nerve to say, "Please, you need to stop Terapagos." I was going to say something, but she asked nicely, so I'll let it slide. But what I won't let slide is what she did to my boy. Briar allowed Kieran, someone who needed to sit down somewhere and recollect himself, to tag along on the expedition. She gave him hope of fighting a legendary, not knowing that she also reignited his hope for a rematch against us. She then kept pushing and egging Kieran to show off Terapagos, ignoring extremely hard to miss red flags, leading to the Pokemon going berserk. And now, Kieran can't participate in the battle because he's frozen by guilt and fear, blaming himself for Terapagos going wild and thinking that he'll screw up again if he takes action due to this woman's enabling and her obsessive behavior. You could argue that Kieran acted on his own volition and needed no outside validation for his actions. You could even argue that Briar was blinded by her obsession for Terapagos. But she took advantage of Kieran, and he was in the right state of mind to do so. If there was a character from this franchise that I'd consider hating, no, that's too strong of a word, maybe detest, abhor, loathe? Yeah, that one sounds better. Loathe. then congratulations, you're one of them. And you're not even the only one from this game that I despise, or the worst. Briar, who's not only an adult, but a teacher, let her ambition put her students and herself in harm's way. Have you by chance heard of the term child endangerment? And I'm just gonna throw this in too. She lacks self-preservation skills. Like, how are you a teacher at a battle academy and not be competent enough to use a Pokemon in battle? Oh, and did I forget to mention that we were possibly miles below the surface? Judging from that earlier cutscene in the elevator, there's a good chance that we were in Hollow Earth levels of death. If our group got trapped in that cave or worse, who's coming to save us, let alone recover us? I'm just saying. And lastly, this is the cherry on top of our cake. What consequences did Briar have to face? Oh yeah, a scolding. So Briar can get away with enabling a child who was on a mental struggle and putting our lives on the line for her self-serving goals? Not only that, but she can still publish a book. And we all know that it doesn't contain those important details I mentioned earlier. Long story short, I don't like her. I couldn't exist in the Pokemon world because I would have made it my mission to put her behind bars. Whether by suing, reporting her to the likes of Looker or Officer Jenny, or, if push comes to shove, placing a possibly suspicious object on her doorstep and catching her interacting with it. Rest assured, that last part was a joke, for I am a law-abiding citizen of the Paldea region, and by no means would I jeopardize my goal of becoming the very best just to put someone in the slammer. I say that, but she could have at least given us some kind of compensation for risking our necks for her. Like, I don't know, treating me and the siblings to dinner or gifting us some rare items. Something. What, you thought I was gonna ask for money? No, I'm 3 million Pokédollars rich in Scarlet. Even when I'm supposed to be mad, I'm still trying to be reasonable. At least, I think so. But back on topic, all we end up getting is a book. I should have let one of my Pokemon torch it. Regardless, we successfully reached out to Kieran, put Terrapagos to rest, and having a sentimental moment, returned home from our expedition. Well, folks, if there's still anybody here at this point, we made it to the end of the main story of the Indigo Disc. Now we'll solely focus on Kieran's character arc and some key characters that led to his descent. So without further ado, let's dive into our last exhibit, the culprits. Now, in order to fully grasp Kieran's character arc, we must revisit his upbringings in the first DLC. We'll also be starting off with the first culprit, Carmine. Back in Kitakami, Kieran's relationship with his sister was the stereotypical older-younger sibling dynamic, except for the fact that their relationship was kinda toxic. In the first half of the Teal Mask, Kieran was sort of like Carmine's underling, not doing much of anything unless told to. However, if he showed some defiance, questioned her, or even seemingly opened his mouth, Carmine would yell at Kieran, even resorting to verbal threats just to shut him up and make him submit. To put more salt on the wound, in some situations, she would just throw him under the bus by undermining him or downplaying his feelings whenever he tries to express himself. Some examples include, "If you know what's good for you." "It's not like I hit him or anything." "Kiki's still a baby." That one specifically grinds my gears. "Just ignore my little brother. Must be teen angst." Just to name a few. "Oh, but that's just classic sibling banter. My sibling and I say way worse things to each other, but it's all fun and games." In case this happens to be you, Need I remind you what happens nearly every time Carmine resorts to yelling? Do those reactions seem like it's just sibling banter? For further instance, take this scene where Kieran kindly offers to give us his mask for the festival, all for it to be immediately shut down by his sister. Now, did she have to dial things up from 0 to 100 over a mask? She could have simply told us that there were masks at the festival, but instead went for the extreme. Outside of those examples, Carmine is, at times, annoyingly overbearing and controlling. Even we were not safe from her gaze, as she was trying to recruit us after we won our first match. Back on Kieran, these factors would have led to him developing low self-esteem, but also with a side of dependency. Allow me to explain. Before Part 2 was released, we didn't know if Kieran, and Carmine too, had any friends, for he was always with Carmine. If we take into account what I mentioned previously, that low self-esteem could have resulted in self-doubt, which could explain why Kieran sticks with Carmine despite the emotional mistreatment. He even flat out says that Carmine does everything for him, but it's not like he can't think for himself. For in the very next text box, he admits to us that he wants to get stronger so he can be self-reliant. He continues on by adding that he wants to become someone people can rely on and someone that the ogre could see as a friend. Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment and let you think. Does this sound like the ambition of someone who's emotionally and logically tainted? Take your time and think. As a matter of fact, make a mental note of this going forward. This kid was miserable because of Carmine, and seeing how he had no one outside of her, not counting the grandparents, isolated, which would lead to him idolizing Ogerpon, an outcast Pokemon that had the strength to fight off the Fraud Trio. If we factor in what I've mentioned beforehand, then Kieran would have viewed her as the only thing that he could relate to, but also inspire towards, to encourage change and self-betterment for himself and his life. That is, until we showed up. Forgive me, but I feel like I must clarify myself before we move on. If by any means that you got the impression that I'm trying to demonize Carmine, I'm not. At least, not intentionally. Like Kieran, she has her flaws and partakes in a little character arc of her own, albeit a bit half-baked compared to Kieran's in my opinion. By the end of the Teal Mask, she mellows out from being her default self and learns how to warm up towards outsiders, seemingly becoming a better person. Although there's still that particular monkey wrench that prevents me from seeing her as redeemable as the game suggests she is. There were instances where she felt bad about keeping the secret from Kieran, but those interactions between the two of them during the first half of the Teal Mask will forever taint my opinion of her. I know that she still cares about her brother, but the way she treated Kieran will always have me asking why. Also, she never truly apologized to Kieran. She tried once, but Kieran was at his breaking point, so he wasn't having it at the time. And she hasn't tried again since. Not even in the Indigo Disc. Yeah, I still don't like her, and I don't think I ever will. I mean, congratulations, you softened up and became more likable in the end, but can we address the bomb we made that's under the metaphorical tape? Regardless, let's move on to the protagonist. We can all admit, every time we become the main character, we ourselves become a Mary Sue. For all my fellas, myself included, a Gary Stew. Whether we have max level Pokemon or legendaries by the end of our journey, we become the strongest trainer in the region. This is still true once we enter Kitakami. After our first battles with Carmine and Kieran, we proved to Kieran that not only are we strong, but stronger than his sister. Once we split off into pairs, Kieran meets our ride Pokemon, now knowing that we're even capable of taming an obscure Pokemon, as well as slowly getting to know us better. These moments can be interpreted as him beginning to like and idolize us, similarly to Ogerpon. Unlike Ogerpon, we managed to become friends with Kieran. He started to warm up towards us, slowly became happier since he met us, and he even started showing a little backbone towards his sister. He didn't just have Carmine anymore. He had us, someone who didn't berate him or make him feel small, Someone who didn't want to silence him, but instead interact with and understand him. Simply put, he wasn't alone anymore. We brought a positive change into Kieran's life, one that he desperately needed. But we all know that good things don't last forever, which leads to the betrayal that we're all familiar with. The moment when we lied to his face, Kieran's worldview became warped, and his once wholesome ambition started to become twisted. The one Kieran thought was a friend was a no-good liar. To him, we were no better than his sister. While Carmine was upfront with her form of cruelty, we were secretly deceitful. And despite this betrayal, we got away with taking the one thing Kieran had always wanted, Ogerpon's friendship. Now, I must ask you to try to see things from Kieran's perspective. We practically walked into this kid's life and without being in the region for less than a week, got to meet the Ogre of Legend, learned secret family history, and became Ogerpon's new trainer. Meanwhile, Kieran got nothing. He was lied to by his supposed friend, his own flesh and blood kept secrets from him, and said friend got to have Ogerpon despite wronging him. How was that fair? Why does a liar who played with other people's feelings get to be the one that Ogerpon loves? To Kieran, we were an undeserving fraud that can have and take whatever we want. What makes this more tragic, at least from his perspective, is that Kieran couldn't do anything about it. We were too strong and well experienced in battling, so he'd lose to us every time. But those losses didn't stop him from opposing us again, to try to stand against what he judged to not be right. However, when we battled in Blueberry Academy, he doesn't just oppose us for what we did. I'd say that he opposed the idea of us, the strongest. I called us Mary Sue's for a reason, but allow me to explain. Now, there were some key details that I told you to keep track of, but I mentioned those a lifetime ago, so I know asking that of you would be too much. Frankly, I would have forgotten to keep track myself, and I'm the one who typed this script. But anywho, it's time that I shed some light on them. Earlier in the video, I jokingly mentioned that Kieran's motto was, with great power comes great status. Well, that ain't exactly the case. If he were to have one, Kieran's motto would be more fittingly, with great power comes greater opportunities. Why do I say that, you ask? Well, it's because we inadvertently taught him that the strong can get whatever they want. Stick with me now. Earlier, I mentioned how his ambition became twisted. After that certain turning point in the story, his pursuit for strength was no longer for self-betterment, but to make us pay. And after everything that happened to him in the Teal Mask, and continuously losing against us, we showed him that it's the strong who decide. It doesn't matter if you're morally good or bad. If you're strong, the world is your cloister. And who's going to stop you if you're the strongest in the verse? That was the idea that was brewing inside his head, and the reason he began obsessing over getting stronger. Remember the conversation Kieran had with the NPC and how he was talking him down? That was him projecting his newfound mindset, where he basically told his classmate, if you can't be strong, then you don't have a place here. I also mentioned earlier in the video about his ego, and I too mentioned that for a reason. We all like to win sometimes, and last time I checked, no one likes losing. And some of us may have experienced a winning streak, but not just any winning streak. I mean one that makes you feel like you can't possibly fail or lose until you go one step too far and you end up falling right back to square one, if not further down. This is exactly what happened to Kieran. He got a taste of what it's like to finally win, to be strong enough to stand on his own 2 feet, but not without its costs. His friends and peers became alienated, tense, borderline fearful of him, and he became something unrecognizable. Battling wasn't for fun and games or understanding each other and their Pokemon, it was for showing off strength and proving your worth. And Kieran's ego, inflated to the max. That is why when we beat him in the champion battle, he practically had a mental breakdown. Winning battles and gaining strength with the ultimate goal of finally beating us was all that this kid cared about. And once those things slipped from his grasp, he couldn't recover. It was also why Kieran was so bent on capturing Terrapagos. Carmine may have mentioned that he had an ego and didn't take losing well, but who doesn't? Everyone has an ego, large or small, but unique to the individual, and everyone handles losing differently. However, the point that I'm trying to make here is that while Kieran may have had flaws, he was pushed into becoming the Kieran from the Indigo Disc by us. Carmine doing the major damage and us the player being the final push that made Kieran shatter. But what if I was to tell you that there was a third culprit? One that could have remedied the situation back at Kitakami but actively decided to make it worse. Actually, forget making an intro for him. He doesn't even deserve one. It's Kieran's grandpa. Before I try to make Gramps look and sound bad, just know that I wanted to like him. Him and Grandma seemed like nice folk to be around. When I first met them, they gave me the a friend of our grandson is a friend of the family kind of vibe, and I liked that. It almost felt like I gained a new family away from home. But enough with the sappy stuff. We're here to expose Grandpa's involvement in all this. So by all means, let's expose him for his crimes. Now the major thing that irritated me was when Grandpa decided to keep Kieran, his flesh and blood, from knowing the truth about Ogerpon. Like, I know why he told us and Carmine, but at the same time, I don't get why he thought Kieran had to be kept oblivious about it. The story was family history, one that Kieran had every right of knowing about, but Grandpa was totally fine with telling an outsider? I can also understand why he wanted to keep the truth hidden, but knowing how I think, who said if I was on board with keeping it a secret? If given the choice, y'all know I would have told Kieran from the get-go. And more importantly, who was going to stop me if I did? It's definitely not them two. Not in this life. I've dealt with worse. But I'm getting off topic. I almost forgot to mention the excuse he used to justify himself not telling Kieran, where he simply says, "I'll tell him when the time is right." When? Today? Tomorrow? When he's in his 30s? To me, that was not a valid reason to keep your grandson in the dark. About family history, no less. That quote in and of itself is too vague, and frankly, under the right circumstances, can be postponed into obscurity. By the time Gramps had found the right time, Kieran would have found out some other way if he didn't eavesdrop. Another thing, did you notice how he sort of tolerated Carmine writing Kieran off? He gets on to her about mistreating Kieran, but seemingly backs off after Carmine's questionable comment. And he just stands there like, well, I don't like the method, but what can I do? Firstly, Carmine, what is wrong with you for you to be yelling at your grandpa? Second, Gramps, I mean, you own the house that provides a roof over her head, fresh food, and warm sheets at night. You can get real creative if you have that mindset. Besides that, it's not just because I empathize with Kieran, but knowing how I was raised, stunts like these in front of an adult were not tolerated. Back to the secret, even though he didn't know what would happen if Kieran found out, the fact that the grandpa could have included Kieran but chose not to grinds my gears. Firstly, and I'm aiming this at Gramps and Carmine, but even if Carmine had a valid reason for running Kieran off, it didn't cross your minds that Kieran would have found this meetup suspicious? Also, seeing how both Gramps and Carmine talk about Kieran at times, it almost seems like they view him as a child when he's clearly in his teens. Unless he's a very tall 6-year-old. I firmly believe that Kieran had the right to know the truth, whether he ended up trying to convince his community of Ogerpon's innocence or not. And the fact that both Gramps and Carmine seemingly treat Kieran like he can't handle the truth bothers me. If I was Kieran, I would have felt insulted. Now, I'm not going to argue that if we told Kieran that it would have prevented everything that happened afterward, but I do believe that it could have minimized the damage we caused him. Not to mention, revealing the truth could have prevented a lot of unnecessary tension and drama throughout the DLC. Although, being realistic, it would still depend on how Kieran would have handled it all. Would he forgive us if we didn't lie to his face or lie about seeing Ogerpon at the festival? Or would he still give us the side eye for even participating in that conversation? Who knows? What I do know is, if I wasn't defending my client, is that everyone here can catch these hands. If I was a girl, don't get no ideas, I'm fighting Carmine. If I was an old man, I'd be fighting Gramps too. The Protag is a weird case since technically I'd be referring to myself in this context. So I'm gonna let that go. If given the chance. Anyways, outside of us, these two are still guilty in my eyes. The reason that I excluded us is that we sort of repaid our debt to Kieran. Despite the part that we played, we did save Kieran and let him redeem himself back in Area 0, and we also helped retake his hometown for Petrarant. As for the other two, for all I care, both of them can join Briar behind bars. Could you argue that Kieran interpreted things differently and behaved irrationally? Yes, you could. However, at the end of the day, he's just a boy. Kieran isn't a child, per se, but a teenager similar in age to us. And we all knew what it was like to be a teenager. We all did or said things that we may view now as cringy, stupid, or irrational, sometimes without even thinking whether or not it had repercussions. And it's not like Kieran wasn't aware that his actions in PokéCello were unfounded. He was. But it wasn't until he went through those series of events that he truly gave in to becoming an antagonist. He wasn't a kid with a pre-existing toxic obsession for strength. He was a kid molded by his environment, his sister. And when he couldn't take it anymore, he snapped. So after all this, what's the verdict? Let's find out. I did it. I did it. I did it! Ain't no one doing it like me. Saul Goodman who? Nah, you're looking at the new and improved lawyer. Side note, even though I did win the trial in the end, there's still one glaring question. Is Kieran truly innocent? No. Being realistic here, despite having valid reasons to oppose the ones who wronged him, and being a kid, Kieran did make some poor decisions, from distressing fellow students to running a whole school. But he didn't harm anybody, at least not physically. If this case was real, he'd be charged with something like, oh, I don't know, public disturbance. Although if the punishment was up to me, I'd just give him community service and let him clean up items around the terrarium. The place is littered with items, and cleaning those up would be beneficial to the Pokemon living there. Like, I thought this place was for Pokemon, not trash. But you know what? Either scenario would be a good enough ending for me. I did my job, and my boy's a free man. Case closed. Hey folks, if you made it to this point, then thank you, truly. I apologize for how long this took to make, especially to those who may have been waiting since the last one. To be frank, I got sidetracked. But last year wasn't the greatest for me either, so there were several factors for the video's delay. Regardless, I enjoyed making this, and I hope you enjoyed your watch as well. Also, for the first time on my path as a somewhat YouTuber, I had help. So here's a shout out to fellow YouTuber Okina Aster. I hope I pronounced your name right. They made a masterclass comment on my last video, which provided me some very useful insight. They even offered that I could use some pointers from their analysis for my video. And with them having very good pointers, and especially since YouTube got rid of their comment, I decided to implement some of their ideas into the video. I hope that I articulated myself to do your ideas justice. And once again, thank you for helping me make this video. Did you agree with the ideas in this video, or was there something you didn't agree with? Let's start a conversation. If you have a character that you want me to discuss in the future, be sure to leave a comment. My channel is still small, so I'll see your comments. And as always, thank you for watching. This has been B.M.W, the Chocolate Luigi, and I'll see you all next time.